6 months after the Galactic High Council session, the Academy had implemented new protocols for human students. Lisa found herself in advanced strategic command courses rather than standard combat training. The galaxy had decided that humans did not need to learn how to overcome fear of predators because they simply did not experience that fear in the same way other species did. The changes were not limited to education. Human colonies received new classifications in galactic databases. They were no longer listed as standard settlements, but as apex threat neutralization zones. Other species planning expeditions to dangerous worlds began specifically requesting human technical advisors. Lisa graduated with highest honors and received assignment to the USC Endeavor as a tactical officer. Captain Sarah Martinez welcomed her aboard the sleek exploration vessel with a mixture of pride and concern. "Your reputation precedes you, Lieutenant Carter," Martinez said as they toured the ship. "Half the galaxy sees you as a symbol of human capability. The other half sees you as proof that humans are too dangerous to be trusted." The Endeavor was a mixed-species crew designed to test how well humans could work alongside alien colleagues who now understood their true nature. The ship carried representatives from 12 different species, each watching to see how humans would behave with their secret revealed. Their first mission took them to Haven's Rest, a colony world where several species of apex predators had mysteriously vanished over the past year. The disappearances had created an ecological puzzle that scientists could not solve. As their shuttle descended through Haven's Rest's atmosphere, Lisa studied the mission briefings. 3 species of large predators had simply left the main continent, where human colonists lived. Razor hawks, massive flying hunters with 8-foot wingspans, ground stalkers, pack hunters similar to Earth's ancient dire wolves, sand serpents, burrowing ambush predators that had dominated the desert regions. None showed signs of disease or injury. They had simply relocated to other continents where no humans lived. The shuttle landed at New Denver, the colony's main settlement. Mayor Steve Parker met them at the landing pad along with Security Chief Linda Hayes. Both humans looked confused about why their quiet colonial success had attracted galactic attention. "I do not understand what needs investigating," Parker said, as he led them through the town. "Haven's Rest has become one of the safest colony worlds in this sector. We have not had a predator attack in over a year." Dr. Yeath, the Endeavor's saurian xenobiologist, examined the ecological data with growing amazement. The predator species did not die out or fall victim to disease. They migrated en masse to regions far from human habitation. Security Chief Hayes shrugged. "The wildlife just became more manageable after we got the colony properly established. I assumed it was natural adaptation." Lisa walked through New Denver's streets with Chief Science Officer Commander Torres, a veteran explorer, who had seen colonies on dozens of worlds. The town was remarkably peaceful. Children played in parks without supervision. Adults worked in fields and factories without weapons or protective gear. It was a level of civilian safety that few colonies ever achieved. "This is what human colonies become," Torres explained. "Not through heavy defenses or constant vigilance, but through the systematic elimination of variables that create danger." They visited the perimeter monitoring stations where colonists tracked local wildlife movements. The data showed a clear pattern. Large predator species had begun avoiding the main continent shortly after human settlement reached critical mass. The avoidance was not random. It was systematic and complete. Dr. Yeath made an unsettling discovery when he analyzed predator migration routes. The species did not simply move randomly. They coordinated their departures and chose new territories that minimize overlap with human expansion patterns. Lisa studied the migration data with growing understanding. They are not just avoiding current human settlements. They are avoiding areas where humans are likely to expand in the future. The implications were staggering. The predators were not simply reacting to human presence. They were anticipating human behavior and making strategic decisions to avoid future conflicts. Commander Torres assembled the investigation team in the colony's conference room. Representatives from several species sat around the table, each trying to understand what they were seeing. The predator species are engaging in predictive threat avoidance, Torres announced. They are studying human expansion patterns and relocating preemptively to avoid contact. Ambassador Kethel, a Nebulan diplomat who had joined the mission, swirled with concerned colors. This suggests that apex predators throughout the galaxy may be developing specific adaptations to deal with human expansion. Mayor Parker looked confused. Is that a bad thing? The wildlife learned to stay away from people. That seems like a good outcome for everyone. Dr. Yith's scales darkened with worry. Mayor, what you describe represents a fundamental shift in galactic ecosystem dynamics. Apex predators are abandoning territories they have held for millions of years, specifically to avoid contact with one species. Lisa realized they were witnessing evolution in action, not biological evolution, but behavioral evolution happening in real time. Predator species were learning to recognize and avoid humans not through individual experience, but through some form of species-wide information sharing. The investigation team spent 2 weeks on Haven's Rest, documenting the systematic absence of apex predators from human-inhabited areas. They found evidence that the predators were thriving in their new territories, but had completely altered their behavioral patterns to accommodate human expansion. As they prepared to leave, Lisa stood on a hill overlooking New Denver. The colony was beautiful and peaceful, a testament to human ability to create safe communities in dangerous environments. But she now understood the cost of that safety. Commander Torres joined her on the hill. Having second thoughts about your species' methods? He asked. Lisa shook her head. No. I am having first thoughts about the responsibility that comes with our capabilities. She pointed toward the town below. Every child down there can play safely because predators have learned to hunt elsewhere. Every family can sleep peacefully because threats have been eliminated or deterred. That is what humans do. We make places safe. But at what cost to the galaxy's natural order? Torres asked. Lisa considered this carefully. Maybe the natural order needed changing. Maybe apex predators ruling through fear and intimidation was not the best way for ecosystems to function. The return journey to Nexus Prime gave the crew time to process what they had learned. Humans were not destroying ecosystems or eliminating species indiscriminately. Instead, they were forcing fundamental changes in how apex predators operated throughout the galaxy. Species that had dominated through fear and violence were learning to coexist, relocate, or adapt. The result was safer environments for civilian populations of all species, but also a complete restructuring of galactic ecosystem dynamics. Back at the Academy, Lisa was assigned to train new mixed-species tactical teams. Her first class included students who had heard about her encounter with the Vorthak and were curious to learn from the human who had made an apex predator back down. As she stood before the class, Lisa looked at the mix of alien faces watching her. Saurians, Zephyrite, Nebulans, and others, all trying to understand what humans brought to galactic civilization. My species evolved on a world where safety was not guaranteed, she began. We learned that if you want to protect your community, you cannot simply build walls and hope for the best. You have to identify threats and address them systematically. She activated a holographic display showing predator population data from around the galaxy. Some of you think this makes humans dangerous. Others think it makes us valuable allies. Both perspectives have merit. We are dangerous to things that threaten civilian populations. We are valuable allies for anyone who wants to build safe communities. In dangerous places, a young Saurian student raised his hand. What happens when your threat assessment capabilities are turned toward intelligent species? Lisa had been expecting this question. It was the concern that kept many alien diplomats awake at night. Intelligent species that follow galactic law and respect civilian safety have nothing to fear from human capabilities, she replied. Our threat elimination instincts are calibrated for predators, not for reasoning beings who can be negotiated with. But who decides what constitutes a threat? The student pressed. Lisa smiled. The same people who decide that children should be able to play safely in parks. The same people who believe families should not have to live in fear. The same people who think civilian populations deserve protection from things that want to hurt them. She paused, looking around the room. Humans are not perfect. We make mistakes and sometimes our solutions cause new problems. But we refuse to accept that danger is something people should have to live with. If that makes us different from other species, then we will be different. The class continued with tactical exercises, but Lisa knew the real lesson had already been taught. Humans had revealed their true nature to the galaxy, and now everyone had to decide what that meant for the future. The Vorthak incident had started as a simple training exercise, but it had. The Galactic High Council convened an emergency session 30 days after the Vorthak incident. Representatives from 47 different species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall on Nexus Prime. The atmosphere was tense as Dr. Brooks prepared to present her findings to beings who had governed galactic affairs for centuries. Lisa sat in the witness section, feeling small among the massive delegates. The Saurian representative stood nearly 9 feet tall with gleaming scales and sharp teeth. The crystalline collective sent 3 Zephyrite speakers whose bodies sparkled like living diamonds. Even the normally peaceful Nebulan delegate seemed agitated, his gaseous form swirling with unusual colors. "Honored delegates," Dr. Brooks began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's advanced acoustics. Our investigation has revealed information about human biology and behavior that has significant implications for galactic security and diplomacy. She activated a holographic display showing brain scans and genetic analysis. Humans possess neurological and genetic traits that make them unique among known intelligent species. They are evolutionary specialists in threat elimination. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Saurian delegate, General Korthak, leaned forward with interest. His people prided themselves on being apex predators. "Explain this specialization," he demanded in his rumbling voice. Brooks changed the display to show Earth's extinction timeline. Throughout their evolutionary history, humans systematically eliminated competitive apex predators. Saber-toothed, cats, cave bears, giant wolves, massive predatory birds. These were not random extinctions. They follow a specific pattern of strategic elimination. The Nebulan delegate, Ambassador Drift, spoke in his whispering voice. "Many species hunt predators for food or defense. This does not seem unusual. The difference," Brooks continued, is in the motivation and methodology. Most species hunt predators when necessary for survival. Humans hunt predators for safety. They eliminate threats preemptively, before those threats become immediate problems. She brought up galactic settlement data. This pattern has continued throughout human expansion into space. On every world where humans establish colonies, apex, predator populations either relocate, diminish, or alter their behavior to avoid human contact. The hall erupted in concerned chatter. Several delegates demanded specific examples. Brooks provided them. Kepler 442b. The native shadow maws were pack hunters that had dominated the planet for millions of years. Within 20 years of human settlement, they relocated entirely to polar regions. Proxima Centauri B tunnel worms that had never shown avoidance behavior began actively detecting and avoiding human presence. Admiral Watson stood to address the assembly. His uniform bore the insignia of Human Space Command, and his presence commanded attention. "The patterns Dr. Brooks describes are accurate," he said calmly. "Human colony security protocols include systematic threat assessment and elimination. We consider this basic safety management." General Korthak's eyes narrowed. "You speak of elimination. Do you mean extermination?" "When necessary," Watson replied without hesitation. "If a species poses a significant threat to civilian safety and cannot be relocated or deterred, then yes, we eliminate the threat." The word eliminate seemed to echo through the hall. To human ears, it sounded practical and responsible. To alien ears, it sounded terrifying. Ambassador Drift's gaseous form darkened. "You systematically destroy apex predators wherever you go." "We neutralize threats," Watson corrected, "through study, understanding, and appropriate response. Sometimes this means relocation. Sometimes deterrence, sometimes elimination. We use whatever method is most effective." Dr. Brooks added more evidence to her presentation. "The Vorthak incident demonstrates that this is not just human policy, it is human instinct. Lisa Carter had no conscious intention of intimidating the creature, but her presence triggered recognition responses that we have never seen before." She played the video of Lisa's encounter with the Vorthak. The assembled delegates watched in silence as the massive predator backed down from a small, human student. The creature recognized something in Miss Carter that its species has learned to fear over millions of years of evolution. It saw an apex predator specialist. General Korthak studied Lisa with new interest. "This small human made a Vorthak submit through presence alone?" "Yes," Brooks confirmed. "And subsequent testing reveals that this ability exists in all humans. To varying degrees, they are neurologically programmed to identify, track, and eliminate apex predators." The implications began to sink in. Species that had considered humans to be primitive newcomers were realizing they had been sharing the galaxy with something far more dangerous than they had understood. The Crystalline Collective's senior speaker, Harmony, asked the question many delegates were thinking. "If humans are threat elimination specialists, what does this mean for galactic security? Are we safe?" Admiral Watson addressed this concern directly. "Humans do not eliminate threats indiscriminately. We target species and situations that pose actual dangers to civilian populations. Intelligent species that follow galactic law have nothing to fear from human presence." "But you decide what constitutes a threat," General Korthak pointed out. "Your species makes these determinations based on your own judgment." "As does every species," Watson replied. "The difference is that humans have the capability and willingness to act on those determinations." Dr. Brooks presented her final evidence. Our research suggests that humans fill a unique ecological niche in the galaxy. They serve as apex predator specialists who maintain balance by preventing any single predatory species from dominating entire ecosystems. She showed comparative data from human and non-human colonies. Human settlements consistently have lower crime rates, fewer predator attacks, and more stable civilian populations. This is because humans eliminate the variables that create those problems. The Assembly digested this information with varying degrees of concern and fascination. Some species saw humans as useful allies who could make dangerous territories safe for colonization. Others viewed them as potential threats, who might someday decide that other intelligent species posed risks worth eliminating. Ambassador Drift raised another concern. What happens when human expansion encounters species that cannot be relocated or deterred? Species that are essential to their ecosystems? Watson's answer was matter-of-fact. We adapt our methods. Humans are capable of complex problem-solving. We find solutions that achieve safety without causing ecological collapse. And if no such solution exists? Drift pressed. Watson paused for a moment. Then we make difficult decisions based on the relative value of human civilian safety versus ecological preservation. The honesty of this answer sent a chill through the Assembly. Humans were admitting that they would choose their own safety over the preservation of indigenous species if forced to make that choice. General Korthak spoke for many when he said, "You are describing yourselves as the galaxy's ultimate predators, creatures who hunt the hunters themselves." Lisa finally stood to speak. Her young voice carried clearly through the hall as she addressed beings who had governed worlds for centuries. "We do not see ourselves as predators," she said. "We see ourselves as protectors. Everything we do is aimed at making places safe for families to live and children to grow. We eliminate threats because we refuse to accept that danger is something people should have to live with." She paused, looking around at the alien faces watching her. Maybe that makes us different from other species. Maybe it makes us dangerous, but it also makes us very good at keeping people safe. The session continued for hours as delegates asked questions and debated implications. Some species called for restrictions on human expansion. Others argued that human threat elimination capabilities made them valuable allies for securing dangerous territories. By the end of the day, one thing was clear. The galaxy's understanding of humanity had changed forever. The small, seemingly primitive species that had stumbled into space travel was actually something far more sophisticated and potentially dangerous than anyone had realized. Humans were apex predator specialists, evolutionary experts in threat, elimination, who had spent millions of years learning to hunt the things that hunted everything else. They had brought those skills into space and were quietly reshaping ecosystems throughout the galaxy. The question now was what the galactic community would do with this knowledge. News of what happened in the training room spread through the academy like wildfire. By evening, every student and instructor knew about Lisa's encounter with the Vorthak. The story grew with each telling, but the basic facts remained the same. A human student had made an apex predator back down without using any weapons or technology. Lisa sat in her small dormitory room, trying to study for her next exam. The words on her datapad blurred together as her mind kept returning to the moment when she locked eyes with the creature. She could not explain what had happened any better than anyone else could. Dr. Helen Brooks worked late in her laboratory, reviewing the video recordings of the incident. She had studied xenobiology for 40 years and had never seen anything like it. The Vorthak's behavior change was not gradual or uncertain. It was immediate and complete, as if a switch had been flipped in the creature's mind. Brooks slowed down the video and watched frame by frame. The exact moment of change occurred when Lisa took her fourth step toward the cage. The Vorthak had been in full intimidation mode, but in the space of 2 seconds, everything changed. The creature's posture, its facial expression, even the way it held its claws, all shifted to something defensive. She sent a message to Commander Morrison requesting an immediate meeting. There were tests that needed to be run, questions that needed answers. The next morning, Lisa was called to the medical wing. Morrison and Brooks were waiting for her in a sterile white room filled with scanning equipment. "We need to understand what happened yesterday," Brooks said gently. She was a kind woman with gray hair and soft eyes, but her expression was serious. "This kind of interaction between species has never been recorded before." Lisa nodded. "I want to understand it too. I do not know why the creature reacted that way." They began with basic scans. Brain activity, genetic markers, pheromone analysis, everything that might explain the unusual encounter. As the machines hummed around her, Lisa tried to remember exactly what she had felt when looking at the Vorthak. There was something familiar about it, she said while the brain scanner mapped her neural patterns. Not familiar like I had seen it before, but familiar like I understood what it was. Brooks frowned at the readings on her screen. "Your brain activity shows unusual patterns in the threat assessment regions. Much higher activity than normal, but also different from what we see during fear responses. They ran more tests. Blood, samples, hormone levels, reaction time measurements. Each test revealed something unexpected about Lisa's biology, but nothing that clearly explained the Vorthak incident." Meanwhile, Morrison had begun his own investigation. He spent hours in the Academy Library, searching through databases of human military history. What he found disturbed him more than he wanted to admit. Humans had a history unlike any other species in the galactic community. Most intelligent species evolved on worlds where they learned to coexist with larger predators. They developed technology and social structures that allowed them to avoid or hide from dangerous creatures. Humans had done the opposite. Morrison pulled up records from Earth's ancient history. Saber-toothed cats, cave bears, giant wolves, massive predatory birds. All had been apex predators in their time. All had been systematically hunted to extinction by primitive humans using nothing more than sharp sticks and coordinated attacks. The pattern continued as humans developed better technology. Every continent humans reached became safer over time, not because the predators left, but because the predators died. Lions, tigers, bears, sharks, crocodiles, all still existed, but in carefully managed populations and specific areas. Humans had not learned to live with apex predators. They had learned to eliminate them. Morrison cross-referenced this information with galactic settlement records. He found the same pattern on every world where humans had established colonies. Within 50 years of human settlement, local predator populations either disappeared completely or moved to regions far from human activity. Other species had assumed this was coincidence or the result of human technology. Morrison was beginning to suspect it was something much more fundamental. Dr. Brooks called him to her laboratory that evening. She had been running additional scans on the Vorthak itself, trying to understand its perspective on the encounter. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a complex brain scan of the creature. "These are the areas that handle threat assessment and survival instincts. They were all highly active during Lisa's approach, but not in the way we would expect. Morrison, studied the colorful display. "What does this mean?" The Vorthak was not experiencing fear, Brooks explained. It was experiencing recognition. Its threat assessment systems identified Lisa as something specific, something that triggered a very particular response. What kind of response? Brooks was quiet for a moment. The same response a predator has when it encounters something higher on the food chain. The Vorthak recognized Lisa as an apex predator that specializes in hunting other apex predators. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. That's impossible. Lisa is a 19-year-old student. She has never hunted anything in her life. Consciously, no, Brooks agreed. But evolution leaves marks that run deeper than conscious thought. The Vorthak saw something in her that we cannot see, something that marked her as dangerous in a very specific way. They stood in silence, looking at the brain scans and video recordings. The implications were staggering. If Brooks was right, then humans were not just another intelligent species that had learned to use tools. They were something far more specialized and potentially dangerous. Back in her dormitory, Lisa was having trouble sleeping. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those 8 red eyes staring back at her. But it was not fear that kept her awake. It was curiosity. She thought about her childhood on Earth. Her family had lived in a rural area where wild animals were common. Bears occasionally wandered through their property, and mountain lions had been spotted in the nearby forests. But Lisa had never felt afraid of them. Other children her age would refuse to play outside after dark, but Lisa had always felt comfortable in wild places. She had assumed this was just personality, but now she wondered if it was something else, something deeper and more instinctive. The next day brought news that would change everything. The Academy's High Council had been notified of the incident and was calling for a full investigation. Representatives from major galactic species were demanding explanations. Lisa found herself at the center of a controversy she did not understand. All she had done was look at a dangerous creature and somehow make it back down. But to the galactic community, this simple act had revealed something about humanity that they had never suspected. As she walked to her next class, she noticed the changes in how other students looked at her. The casual dismissal was gone, replaced by something much more complex. Some looked at her with new respect. Others seemed worried or frightened. Krex, the Saurian student who had faced the Vorthak before her, stopped her in the hallway. "My people pride themselves on being hunters," he said, his voice low. "We are the apex predators of our world. But watching you yesterday, I finally understood why the great hunting beasts of my home world have been avoiding human settlements." He paused, studying her face with new attention. "They recognize something we missed, something that makes them choose to hunt elsewhere." Lisa did not know how to respond to this. She was still the same person she had always been. But somehow, everyone around her was beginning to see her differently. The investigation was just beginning, but already it was clear that the Vorthak incident had revealed something important about humanity's place in the galaxy. Something that would change how other species viewed humans forever. The investigation began in earnest 3 days after the incident. Dr. Brooks had assembled a team of the Academy's best xenobiologists, psychologists, and military analysts. Lisa found herself spending more time in laboratories than in classrooms, as they tried to understand what had happened. The tests were extensive and sometimes uncomfortable. Brain scans while she viewed images of various predators, blood samples taken before and after stress simulations, psychological evaluations that probed every aspect of her personality and background. The results were puzzling. Lisa's genetic markers showed variations that existed in other humans, but rarely in such concentration. Her brain patterns revealed enhanced activity in regions responsible for threat assessment and pattern recognition. Most significantly, her stress responses were completely different from those of other species. When most beings encounter a serious threat, their bodies prepare for flight or submission, Dr. Brooks explained during one of their sessions. Your body prepares for pursuit and elimination. Lisa found this hard to believe. I am not violent. I have never hurt anyone. Violence and predation are not the same thing, Brooks replied. Predation is about systematic threat elimination. It can be accomplished through patience, planning, and persistence just as easily as through direct violence. Meanwhile, Commander Morrison continued his historical research. What he discovered painted a picture of humanity that was both fascinating and disturbing. Human expansion throughout Earth's history followed a consistent pattern. Humans would enter a new region, assess the local threats, and then systematically address each one until the area was safe for human habitation. This was not random violence or destruction. It was methodical, intelligent, and remarkably effective. Humans did not simply avoid dangerous predators or learn to live with them. They studied them, understood their weaknesses, and then eliminated them as threats. Morrison found records of human colonies throughout the galaxy and saw the same pattern repeating. On Kepler 442b, the colonists had arrived to find the world dominated by pack-hunting creatures called shadow maws. Within 20 years, the shadow maws had completely relocated to the planet's polar regions. The colonists reported that the creatures had simply learned to avoid human settlements. On Proxima Centauri b, massive burrowing predators called tunnel worms had initially attacked human outposts regularly. After 5 years, the attacks stopped entirely. Xenobiologists studying the creatures found that they had developed new behavioral patterns specifically designed to detect and avoid human presence. The pattern was consistent across dozens of worlds. Human colonies became safer over time, not through better defenses, but because local predators learned to hunt elsewhere. Dr. Brooks shared Morrison's findings with the investigation team. The implications were staggering. We are not looking at random coincidences, she announced during a team meeting. We are looking at evidence of evolutionary specialization. Humans may be the only species in the known galaxy that evolved specifically to eliminate apex predators. Dr. Marcus Webb, a Zephyrite psychologist on the team, challenged this conclusion. Many species hunt predators for food or resources. This does not make them unique. True, Brooks replied. But other species hunt for sustenance or territory. Humans hunt for safety. They eliminate threats not because they need to, but because they refuse to coexist with them. She pulled up a holographic display showing human settlement patterns. Look at this data. Human colonies do not simply defend against predator attacks. They actively seek out and address potential threats before those threats become problems. They hunt the hunters. The team studied the evidence in growing amazement. Humans had accomplished something that no other species had managed. They had reversed the natural order that placed large predators at the top of the food chain. Back in her dormitory, Lisa was struggling with the personal implications of these discoveries. Her classmates now treated her differently. Some seemed afraid, others appeared fascinated, but none looked at her the way they had before. Zara, the Zephyrite student, approached her after a tactical theory class. I have been thinking about your encounter with the Vorthak, she said, her crystalline voice careful and measured. My people have studied predator behavior for centuries. We learn to recognize threats and avoid them. But you did something different. Lisa waited for her to continue. You made the predator recognize you as a threat. The question is, how did you know to do that? Lisa shook her head. I did not know. I just acted on instinct. That is what concerns me, Zara replied softly. Your instincts are calibrated for something the rest of us cannot even imagine. Similar conversations happened throughout the academy. Students and instructors who had dismissed humans as primitive newcomers were reassessing everything they thought they knew. The investigation team made another significant discovery when they decided to test other humans at the academy. There were 12 human students and instructors in total. Each was exposed to recordings of various predator intimidation displays from around the galaxy. The results were consistent and alarming. Every human showed the same unusual brain patterns that Lisa had displayed. Enhanced threat assessment activity, altered stress responses, and most significantly, neural activity in regions associated with pursuit and elimination rather than avoidance. It is not just Lisa, Dr. Brooks reported to the Academy's administration. This appears to be a species-wide trait. Humans are neurologically programmed to respond to apex predators as competitors rather than threats. Admiral Chen Watson, the IT highest-ranking human in Galactic Military Command, was called to the Academy for questioning. He arrived 2 weeks after the investigation began, a stern man with gray hair and calculating eyes. Admiral, Morrison began, are you aware of humanity's impact on predator populations throughout human-settled space? Watson nodded calmly. Of course. It is standard protocol for human colonies to address local threat assessment and elimination. Address. How exactly? Through systematic evaluation and appropriate response, Watson replied. If a species poses a significant threat to civilian safety, we neutralize that threat. Dr. Brooks leaned forward. Admiral, when you say neutralize, what specifically do you mean? Watson's expression did not change. We study the species, understand its patterns and weaknesses, and then either relocate it or eliminate it as circumstances require. This is basic colony security. The room fell silent. What Watson described as basic security protocols, other species would consider an act of ecological warfare. Do other species not do this? Watson asked, genuinely curious. No, Brooks replied, quietly. Other species adapt their settlements to coexist with local predators. They build defenses, alter their behavior patterns, or relocate their colonies. They do not systematically eliminate indigenous apex predators. Watson considered this information. That seems inefficient and unnecessarily dangerous. Morrison realized they were seeing the fundamental difference between human and alien thinking. To humans, eliminating threats was logical and practical. To other species, it was an inconceivable violation of natural order. The investigation was revealing that humans were not just another intelligent species that had learned to use tools. They were evolutionary specialists in threat elimination, creatures who had spent millions of years learning to hunt the things that hunted everything else. Lisa continued to participate in the tests and interviews, but she was beginning to understand the magnitude of what had been discovered. The Vorthak had recognized her not as another prey animal or even as a predator, but as something specifically designed to eliminate predators like itself. She thought about Earth's history, about the long list of extinct apex predators that had once ruled various continents. She thought about human expansion into space and the consistent pattern of predator populations learning to avoid human settlements. For the first time, she began to understand what the Vorthak had seen when it looked at her. Not a 19-year-old student, but a representative of the species that had systematically eliminated every major predator on its homeworld and was now doing the same thing across the galaxy. The investigation was far from over, but already it was clear that humanity's relationship with the galactic community would never be the same. The discovery would force every species to reconsider their understanding of human nature and what it meant to share the galaxy with apex predator specialists. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Galactic Military Academy on Nexus Prime. Lisa Carter walked through the main corridor, her boots clicking against the metal floor. Other students moved around her, but they kept their distance. She was used to this by now. The academy held students from many different worlds. There were tall reptilian beings called saurians with green scales and sharp teeth. The Zephyrites looked like walking crystals that sparkled in the light. The Nebulans appeared as floating clouds of colored gas that changed shape as they moved. Then there were a few others from smaller species. Lisa was the only human in her advanced class. At 19, she was younger than most other students, but her test scores were among the highest in the academy. This fact made many alien students uncomfortable. They whispered that humans only got into the academy because of political deals, not because they deserved to be there. She entered the combat training room where Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison was waiting. Morrison was a tough human instructor, with gray hair and scars on his arms from old battles. He had been teaching at the academy for 15 years and had trained hundreds of alien soldiers. "Today we continue with Fear Assessment Protocol," Morrison announced as the class gathered around him. "Each of you will face a creature that represents the ultimate predator from the known galaxy." The students formed a circle around a large metal cage in the center of the room. Inside the cage was something that made even the bravest aliens step back. It was called a Vorthak, and it came from a death world called Grimholt. The creature stood 12 feet tall on 8 powerful legs. Its body was covered in black armor-like skin that gleamed under the lights. 8 red eyes sat on its head, constantly moving to watch everything around it. Long claws extended from each leg, sharp enough to cut through steel. When it opened its mouth, rows of needle-sharp teeth dripped with green acid. The Vorthak is considered one of the most dangerous predators in known space, Morrison continued. It has killed thousands of warriors from dozens of species. Today, each of you will approach the containment field and demonstrate your tactical thinking while maintaining composure. A tall Saurian student named Krex went first. His species were natural hunters with strong muscles and quick reflexes. As he approached the cage, the Vorthak immediately focused on him. The creature rose to its full height and began its intimidation display. The sound it made was horrible. It was part roar, part scream, and part something else that seemed to reach into the deepest parts of the brain where fear lived. Krex stopped walking when he was still 10 feet from the cage. His scales turned pale and his hands shook slightly. "Tactical assessment," Morrison ordered. "The creature relies on fear and intimidation," Krex said, his voice not quite steady. "It uses its size and sound to make enemies freeze. In combat, I would recommend long-range weapons and coordinated attacks from multiple angles." Morrison nodded. "Good. Step back." Next came Zara, a Zephyrite whose crystal body normally sparkled with confidence. As she approached the Vorthak, her crystalline form began to dim. The creature's roar made her entire body vibrate like a bell. She managed to get within 8 feet before stopping. The creature's physical capabilities exceed most known species, she said, her voice like wind chimes in a storm. Its acidic saliva suggests a chemical defense system. I would recommend environmental weapons, perhaps gas or electrical attacks. One by one, the other students took their turns. Each managed to get close enough to provide analysis, but none could hide their fear. The Nebulan student named Wisp actually dispersed partially when the Vorthak roared, his gaseous form becoming thin and scattered. Finally, it was Lisa's turn. The other students watched with curiosity. Some seemed to hope she would fail, proving that humans did not belong in the academy. Others looked worried, as if they actually cared what happened to her. Lisa walked toward the cage with steady steps. Her breathing was calm, and her hands did not shake. The Vorthak turned all 8 eyes toward her and began its display. The creature reared up to its full height. Its claws extended to their maximum length. It opened its mouth wide, showing every one of its acid-dripping teeth. Then it released its roar. The sound hit Lisa like a physical force. It was designed by millions of years of evolution to trigger the deepest fear responses in any living creature. It was the sound of death itself, the voice of every nightmare that had ever haunted the dreams of thinking beings. Lisa took another step forward. The Vorthak's roar grew louder. It slammed its claws against the energy barrier that kept it contained. Sparks flew from the impact points. The creature was working itself into a killing frenzy, the same state that had allowed its species to dominate one of the harshest worlds in the galaxy. Lisa took another step. She was now closer to the cage than any other student had managed. The Vorthak's eyes focused entirely on her. In those red depths, she could see intelligence. This was not just a mindless beast. It was a thinking predator that understood exactly what it was looking at. Something passed between them in that moment. The Vorthak's roar slowly faded. Its claws retracted slightly. For the first time since the demonstration began, the creature stepped backward. The room fell completely silent. Even Morrison, who had seen everything in his years of training soldiers, stared in disbelief. In 300 years of using Vorthaks for training, nothing like this had ever happened. Lisa continued to stare at the creature. The Vorthak lowered itself until it was crouching close to the floor. Its aggressive posture melted away, replaced by something that looked almost like respect, or perhaps recognition. Tactical assessment, Morrison said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Lisa began to speak without taking her eyes off the creature. The Vorthak relies on intimidation because it has never needed to develop other tactics. It has always been the apex predator in any environment it enters. Its acid is primarily a digestive aid, not a weapon. The claws are for gripping prey, not cutting. Its real weapon is fear. She paused, still maintaining eye contact with the now quiet creature. In combat, the most effective strategy would not be to fight it directly. Instead, remove its ability to cause fear. Use automated weapons, robots, or soldiers who cannot feel fear. Once it realizes intimidation does not work, it will retreat. This creature is not actually used to fighting. It is used to scaring everything away. Morrison nodded slowly. Step back, Carter. Lisa turned and walked back to join her classmates. Behind her, the Vorthak remained in its submissive position for several more minutes before finally returning to its normal stance. Dr. Helen Brooks, the Academy's chief xenobiologist, had been watching from the observation deck. She immediately activated her communication device and called for an emergency research session. The other students stared at Lisa with new expressions. The casual dismissal was gone, replaced by something else. Confusion, concern, and perhaps, for the first time, a hint of fear. As they left the training room, Lisa could hear whispers behind her. The words were in different alien languages, but she understood enough to know they were talking about her, about what had just happened, about what it might mean. She walked back to her dormitory alone, as usual. But this time, the distance other. Students kept felt different. Before, they had avoided her because they thought she did not belong. Now, they avoided her because they were beginning to think she belonged too well.